as you mentioned, I started off my career at Google, joining what was called Developer Operations, and then it got renamed to Developer Relations on my second day there. I joined as an API support engineer. I don't know why I picked that title or was attracted to that, but for some reason, helping engineers always just seemed like something I always wanted to do. It comes from doing lots of TAing, I guess, and leading summer camp coding sessions back when I was a teenager. That was a really fun gig. I worked on pretty much everything ads related, every 3-letter acronym involving ads, IMA, DFP, DFA, AdSense, you name it. That got me hooked on the Android ecosystem supporting AdMob, and loved hacking on my phones and rooting them and breaking them. That led me to just a passion for APIs and platforms, and really assisting engineers and watching them make really cool stuff. That transitioned. I had a good friend reach out and said, Uber's getting serious about their API platform, to which I said, Uber has an API platform. And that was the start of my Uber journey, and worked there on forming our API platform team, building up the third-party ecosystem, getting a lot of cool integrations, booking rides with lots of buttons, growing out the logistics network there. Slowly, I transitioned into our internal platforms, much at the behest of some of the engineers within that org looking for a new manager, and they told me to be it. So I got to lead the mobile platform for a little while. Started also working on the Java platform, and a team near and dear to my heart, which was our knowledge engineering team, which was the former developer productivity team at Uber, transformed into focusing on productivity tools and knowledge bases, and growing it from there. That transitioned into DoorDash. A lot of great opportunity here to form a org that's focused on tooling and frameworks and foundations, and we've had to grow from scratch here, and it's been, like I said, a lot of fun, very rewarding, but a lot of lessons learned along the way.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro. So tell us a little bit more about your developer platform organization. How is it structured, and how many folks kind of work in there roughly, of course, and how many folks do you support, and to get an idea of the scale?
Yeah, for sure. So DoorDash engineering is around 1,600 engineers nowadays. We have 50 engineers on developer platform, supporting those engineers across the company. Our developer platform is structured really into a yin and a yang. We have our platforms end of the org, which has your web platform, your mobile platform, your backend platform. We use Kotlin for our backend. And then on the other side of the org, we have the productivity teams. We have one that's just focused on our internal developer console and the tooling that developers and engineers see on a day-to-day basis to do their job. And then we also have a team that's focused on our test infrastructure, which is one of the biggest projects that we've been taking on, just amping up our ability to test and being able to produce a more reliable product and creating more customer delight for folks.
Awesome. And how did kind of productivity engineering at DoorDash come about, right? We see a lot of folks, right? We had this one Lowdown with Danny from Netflix. Like, well, mostly you're already doing productivity, but you don't have it dedicated to. When did that happen for you guys? And where, when should you usually see this happen for everyone? When should this happen, right? If you want to kind of give advice to the community.
Yeah, great question. So there was always stewards of productivity at DoorDash during the primordial ooze of the company. These were typically your staff and senior engineers that just kept on having to fix everything that was broken. So maybe we should put in a better foundation so that we're not constantly just firefighting. That formed into a 3 or 4 person team that was considered developer productivity. And they focused on really release as one of the biggest things that they looked at. So sort of the blue-green system that we started off with, just so that we wouldn't take down our infrastructure every time we did a deploy. That was going strong, but a number of our leaders at the company, Ryan Slockel, our head of engineering for one, recognized that we had to grow this org and create a number of different sub teams that focus on different parts. That was really one of his doings of just sort of supporting that and going from there. And that just sort of caused the snowball. There was a little bit of Avengers project from there of saying, oh, this team is sort of our mobile infrastructure team. Let's, glob them in. This team kind of is our web infrastructure team. Let's glob them in. Let's form this team. Let's form that team. And the solar system formed at that point, and pulling in like-minded teams to really form the org. One thing that I love about DoorDash is we have a number of values that fits with having these infrastructure teams, and one of them is our one team, one fight mentality. That meant it was very easy for us to sort of share the burden as we worked towards building out our platform. So everyone kind of counted ownership of the platform. It wasn't just these 3 or 4 folks or these 10 people were shackled with solving everything, and they really got a lot of support, and that really helped the momentum of the org grow from there.
So you didn't have to sell your VP much on,
I have to sell him on a daily basis. I have a meeting with him at 11 a.m. to sell him on another thing. So no, I don't have it that easy. He's a great supporter, but he much like anyone, anyone in leadership position wants to make sure we have the right investment into the org.
And I love your unique experience. You got to see productivity engineering at 2 different organizations, right? It's a fairly new thing, and that doesn't have, how do you see just productivity engineering priorities different from Uber versus DoorDash?
It's amazing seeing the similarities and the differences at the same time. At Uber, it was a constant fight against the complexity of our systems, the sheer magnitude of the number of microservices we had running on bare metal infrastructure, the amount of our code base for mobile platform. You can read up on some of the tales on Twitter about the Presidio architecture and our choices there. A lot of that was wrangling that complexity and building out systems that allowed engineers to not sit there and literally stare at their frozen screen because they weren't able to build, their poor laptops melting through their desk or through their laps, unfortunately, sometimes. And the difference at DoorDash was we were already moving really fast, and we didn't have those blockages. But a lot of times we were moving fast because we hadn't gotten to that scale yet. And the goal of the developer platform organization here was really to set the standards for what we were going to evolve into, but also not to slow down the momentum that we had at the moment. And that's really the balance that we've tried to strike here of enabling engineers and sort of guiding them to do the right things, but not putting blockages in their way. Because there's one thing I found about engineers, they're very good problem solvers. They'll just figure out how to go around you. So we've been working with the teams who want to move fast, understanding, what do you really need right now? They don't need a new build system. They need the ability to test. They don't need a new deployment system. They just want to be able to do a canary. These are examples of things that we get from the community and really influence our roadmaps rather than just being prescriptive and saying, here, take your medicine or else. And not to say that we did that at Uber, but it's one of the values that we have here as we're growing.
No, that's great. Thanks for that insight. Justin, do we want to take a couple of questions here, or should we keep going?
Perfect timing, Rouge. Read my mind. We got a lot of really good questions that have kind of come in. I think just for a little bit more context, first question comes from Ryan, and he'd like to know just at a very high level what the web and mobile platform teams actually provide. And I think what he kind of means is backend versus mobile, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So our web team is focused on basically the 2 halves of the web equation. One is our React front end, and the other one is our Node.js backends for things that power web. There's 2 areas that we really focus on there. One is our standards and frameworks. So web, for example, has created a number of standard libraries. One of them is our gRPC standard library that we have that does all the network routing and et cetera that you need for you, as well as circuit breaking and reliability concerns. On the React side, we work really closely with our design infrastructure team to come out with standard components that people can use, as well as our monorepo support that we have to allow people to build and share packages and libraries more cleanly. On our web, that goes for our website. On our mobile platform side, we have iOS and Android, obviously. They're responsible for really the overall architecture of our apps. They just they have helped build out what we now focus on, our MVVM reactivity clean architecture, as well as work on the common libraries that are shared across the different apps. Stewards of the build system. General teachers of Android as well. So hold office hours, talk about best practices, see what's in the line for iOS 15 or Android R and S coming up. Basically looking at what's on the roadmap and making sure that we're taking advantage of those things, but we're also not breaking. We just recently had that blog post about deep links being broken for everybody. And I know everyone ran into this in Android 12 because I don't remember really seeing the big marquee call out of Google saying, hey, we're going to break your deep links. But it was a surprise to a lot of folks. But yeah, it's just general guidance, oversight, building out technologies. And I also see here a question that's related to that, Justin, which is, what part of that is developer productivity on that end. So we have around, in terms of ratios, we have around 7 folks on Android, 7 folks on iOS, and around 14 folks on developer productivity. But we don't think of it that way. It's very permeable between the teams. That's one thing that we really appreciate here is that we aren't shipping the org to our customers. We're trying to ship products and solutions to folks. So the mobile platform team works hand in hand with the test platform team and comes up with the testing solution. Really we work as one org and one team. So really almost all of the mobile platform team is working on productivity, and almost all the developer productivity could be working on mobile at the time to serve mobile needs.
That's really interesting. And it makes sense, right? Because so many of the tool chains are gonna overlap anyway, so why necessarily have a dedicated when you're really just talking about improving the technology? Jordan has a couple of really good questions. The first one we're going to get to, he has a question about more getting into executive sponsorship, VP sponsorship. We're going to talk some more about that, so I'm going to let that one linger. But he wants to know also, speaking of melting laptops, do developers at DoorDash, are they doing most of their work locally, or are they doing their stuff in remote environments?
Yeah, so most locally right now. We are thinking about remote execution, and I know Gradle has an offering to help with that as well. But we're thinking about more or less right now just the local build environment that folks are using. There is a possibility of doing remote Docker containers and connecting up with LSPs, but that's one of the things of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I don't think that we need that right now. It's not something that it's going to solve all of our problems. I think focusing our energy on better debugging tooling or better frameworks or better components probably be better time served right now. We're not crashing under the weight of our build times just yet, but as everybody knows, as you grow in complexity, the build times grow as well. But there's still lots of fruit to pick off the tree. Modularization in our apps, we just are barely scratching the surface on that right now, both on Android and iOS. Even caching mechanisms on Gradle. We're thinking about, once we get the modularization going, it's better ways to do caching. There's lots of quick wins we can have rather than sort of investing in a gigantic streaming remote execution system with a layer of FS on your laptop. Plus the new laptops are great. The M1s, we just got them for our iOS team, and it's been chugging through code like a champ. So it's great to kind of have the Moore's law there to help scale this a little bit.
I've seen some studies come out lately that are just the impact of just upgrading laptops for a developer team can just be tremendous. So anyway, we've got a few more.
If you aren't ordering laptops for your engineering org right now, you are behind the times.
Especially the M1s are awesome. I will attest. So we have a few more, but let's move it back to the main, and we'll hit some more of these questions in a little bit.
Sounds good. And go back to that earlier topic of what executives and what folks want to see. What are your deliverables around productivity engineering? Your OKRs and KPIs, and what are the ones that you all have? And what are the folks from the VP level want to see? Like we chat with practitioners a lot, but we don't get too many folks like you, Adam, who are directly in that leadership role. And do you push them onto, hey, leadership. Here's what you should be. How much education do you have to do there? Because you've been kind of in the trenches in different organizations. So, sorry, it was like multiple kind of questions in one. But.
No, it's great. It's firing squad. There's a lot there to unpack. But I think the number one question I get from everybody is just, how do you know if you're successful in a developer platform, right? And yeah, you can achieve your goals for the year of like, build this technology, build that technology, and go 0 to 1 on foundational elements. But actually looking at KPIs and saying we're doing great as an org, besides satisfaction from engineers, I think is sort of the $1 million question, right? That's everyone's asking about. We've evolved on that quite a bit. We've done a lot of research in the field of just seeing what people are picking up. I specifically felt a light bulb moment when we came across the space framework. That was somebody on our web platform team actually surfaced that and said, "Hey, take a look at this new framework that came out." And for those of you who don't know, definitely go look at this. But really, it breaks down that question of KPIs into satisfaction, performance, activity, which you're not really supposed to measure as a KPI, communication, collaboration, and efficiency. And for each one of those KPIs, you can basically say, what's the satisfaction of my users? What's the outcomes of the software that I'm building? Is it more reliable? How many pull requests per month are coming in? Do not grade yourself on that, but it's good to sort of understand from a context standpoint. Communication, collaboration, how are people talking? Are they working with each other? And then efficiency, just like how much blockage time do engineers have? And that's where build times come into play, right? If you're sitting there staring at your screen, you're not coding. So we took that, and then we thought about the different life cycles that an engineer goes through: the onboarding process, the learning process, the development process, testing, integration, deployment, even the support. So doing Q&A, doing pull request reviews. And what you do is you can kind of form this matrix. And when you have that matrix, you can kind of get a heat map, right? Like, hey, we have really high satisfaction on our Android platform, but efficiency is really low. So people really like our jokes and they like us as people, but they're really frustrated at their machines all the time. And that's a lot of times where you can sort of pull together that heat map, and then you can make a case for any OKRs you want to take on, right? Because the key result is really the outcome of trying to change these KPIs. Laptops, for example, of saying, hey, we really want to get new laptops. You can show them the heat map and say, look, the satisfaction is really low because everyone says that their laptops can't, really build that fast, right? And efficiency is really low because people are waiting all the time. And if we look at the number of engineers who are reporting this in and how much time is wasted, just sort of makes sense to invest into getting laptops and helping people out, right? And that's really the part. It's not education of leaders. It's not, I feel like that sort of, puts down all their contributions and guidance on where we should go. It's just sort of trying to tell the right story and understanding the metrics that you have available to you to use. But I know this is very nascent field. I know a lot of people struggle with this. I'm not saying that we have it perfect. We are excited about the new way that we're tracking things, but we're still just, babies at this crawling.
Yeah, no, great answer. And you kind of mentioned it a bit, right? You need some sort of data behind these stories and these experiences to share. And great segue to then kind of where are you collecting your developer productivity metrics and KPIs? What tools are you using to kind of get that data? So it's more like tools and processes type of question.
By any means you can. I get made fun of on the team all the time for the amount of scripts that I run locally myself just to pull data. I'll get frustrated that a piece of data doesn't exist, so I'll code something up and pull down stats from GitHub APIs or Chrome or Chronosphere dashboards. But really, it has to come from all over, right? So you have two options. One, you integrate with a tool that is collecting this data for you and centralizing it someplace that you can extract into. Two, you also set up crawlers that go in and reach out and pull this data, and then you have to correlate it together. And I think the key here is to really try to tell the story across all the different pieces of technology to sort of say, here's an Android persona. They're looking at our code labs, but they're not taking any. They're not like using our catalog to look through look through other technology that we have. It's when you can sort of track down that persona and actually study what that type of persona is doing. It gives you a better idea. even onboarding and saying, okay, it takes twice as long for a iOS engineer to onboard and get their first pull request merged than it does for an Android engineer. And that can lead you to what we now have as our KPIs and OKRs, which is we call them our Eng OKRs. And that we have a whole section for velocity. And it's basically broken down into the life cycles that we have. We're tracking the time to the first pull request merged. Basically, do we have a successful onboarding process? We look at the percentage of folks who are using standardization of our testing tooling. We're looking at the lead time it takes from a pull request open to review to when it goes into production, all across every platform, right? So look at that from Kotlin platform, for mobile platform, for web platform, and you can look at the different persona and say, where do they get bogged down? And then we have been looking at things like support Q&A, response time. So as people are asking questions, are they getting an answer right away? Are there too many questions being asked, which means that we should actually have like a knowledge bot? These are the type of different KPIs you can look at to sort of help influence what projects you should take on, right? Because each one of them should be moving the KPI up or down as you go, right? But yeah, it's really just sort of about looking at the looking at looking at it as a whole and telling that narrative again and telling that story and then sharing that out with the engineering community at your company, because they need buy-in, right? They need to say, yes, that sounds right. That sounds like it's going to fix my problems versus just bike shedding on God knows what.
And I love the PR thing, especially we're from Gradle, right? Builds and tests. We live in that every day. Right. What was that one of your kind of low hanging fruits? And what I'm trying to get at is, let's say one of our viewers and folks on watching this today is like, okay, I need to go get this developer productivity team kind of kicked off. Where should I kind of start so I can get some easy wins? What sort of low hanging fruits are you seeing out there that you would say, right? Maybe it could be easy to look at this. So you don't want something to take 1 year and the executive going, okay, well, you started this thing, it took 1 year, whatever you show for, right? What can you, and just have done this in 2 different orgs, what can you kind of share with our folks?
Honestly, the easiest thing is just ask your engineers. If you're not having that dialogue and just opening up surveys or just asking in Slack channels what they want, you're missing out on the most useful data that you can get there. For us at DoorDash, there were a couple key things that we noticed right away when we started forming the org. One of them was the ability to release with a canary process. We didn't really have a canary process here. We had to build one from scratch. We have Spinnaker in the works, and we're getting really close on that. But with the blue-green system, it's like pulling the old magic trick where you pull the tablecloth out as fast as you can and hope the silverware doesn't fly across the room. Same thing, right? So we wanted to have that canary process, and this is one of those things where we could take another year to sort of integrate Spinnaker into our systems, or we came up with a novel solution of using our existing Kubernetes clusters and pods and deploying the canary into the pods using a controller. And that's an example of us moving quick and coming up with short-term solutions that are totally viable, but also balancing the long-term. The executive saying, "Where the hell is this? What's going on?" Right? And you can't do that for an entire year. But yeah, and just going from there, it's really just sort of it's just really about balancing those two mindsets, right? I call them the potholes in the freeways, right? It's you got to fix the potholes on the street all the time. You can't just be running around breaking your car all the time, but you got to build the interstates and the freeways to get from city to city, and that's the long-term stuff that's going to take a little bit longer to put together.
Awesome. And we have a bunch of folks asking here more about the tool chain that you all use. Not sure about how much you can share, but what are you all using for CI, IDE, endpoint security?
Yeah, I could throw out a bunch of technologies. We're thinking about. These are not necessarily endorsements by any means, but things that we use. So we have Bitrise right now for our iOS. We have our own custom Jenkins pipelines for Android and Kotlin. IDEs, people use JetBrains for Kotlin. They use Android Studio for Android. They use VS Code for iOS. No, just kidding. They use Xcode for iOS. And I personally use VS Code for everything, just because I like the keyboard shortcuts. Though some people use JetBrains for everything, right? But yeah, we really just wanted to use standard technology here. We didn't really want to sort of invent new ways of interacting with our code. So that's been something that just sort of organically formed. I think our engineers really fought against sort of not being able to bring their own tool sets here and use them. Though as we grow, we're going to need to come up with custom solutions. I think that sort of just happens, right? You reach a certain complexity, you reach a certain size, and you kind of have to build your own. That's a testament to some of even my former life at Uber, just kind of seeing the build your own that you have to do sometimes to scale.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Justin, maybe take one question and then jump into the next topic.
I mean, we have so many good questions. I'm not sure that we're going to.
So many good questions.
We'll try to. This is great. I mean, thank you, everybody. This is obviously the kind of interaction that we really hope for in these sessions. I want to maybe do the second part of Michael's question about endpoint security, which we cleverly just meshed three questions into one there behind the scenes. But Michael would like to know, how do you manage performance issues when it comes to endpoint security on the local hosts that are doing building?
How do you manage performance issue when it comes to endpoint security? Are we talking like
virus,
Falcon D, like sort of scanning your machine and slowing everything down, or maybe I can get a little bit more clarity on what we're trying to get there?
Sure. So, I mean, you've got obviously endpoint security stuff that has to run like antivirus, but we know pretty well that antivirus can cause like a build time to double.
Got it. All right. So yeah, got it. So this is everyone not against CrowdStrike. But yeah, this is something that I've fought at two companies now, which is when you have something scanning all of your files all the time, and you have something that's building files and creating files all the time, the two like to fight. But what I have seen is that CrowdStrike and folks like them have been very amenable to coming up with solutions. You can whitelist directories to say, hey, these directories are typically safe, and maybe that's just sort of security by obfuscation, because if someone understands that, they can sort of hide in there. But what I can say is our CISO is really great at balancing those things, and has worked really well with our engineers to come up with solutions. Totally understands that our engineers are smart enough to turn these things off if they want to, and I'm not going to name names, but I've known people to come up with scripts that literally shut this stuff down with sudo and close it down so that it doesn't run. We don't want that, right? So it's trying to find a good balance between protecting our machines and what we have to do to let engineers work on a daily basis. This is a testament to why remote execution environments work sometimes, also because if you're not doing the machinations of indexing and building locally, it's a little bit better because you don't have to deal with that. But I'd hate to choose that reason because you have an antivirus running, right? So CrowdStrike has improved a lot. They've gotten better. That's one of the things that we've worked with. It's been good seeing the partnership there with these antiviruses and this endpoint security to make our machines secure and work fast.
Thanks. That was a really good answer. Yeah, we have so many of these. Let's move around along the now, Ruse, and I'm going to try to consolidate some more of these. Do some question gymnastics. We'll see what we can do here.
Stay away from all the questions from Jordan. He's no good. But
he's got some of the best questions.
So a favorite topic, right? We ask this all the time, right? What were some big productivity wins that you all had, and where you learned something new and took the actions that resulted in a win and whatnot, and how you found them, and what can you share there?
Yeah, let me try to consolidate some of the things I've seen from our question bank and sort of go from there. So one of the ones that I mentioned earlier was that canary process that we came up with. It was about 2 to 3 weeks of engineering work. Literally a bunch of engineers said it was impossible to do, and I have a great engineer in our org, Marco. I basically gave him the challenge, and he said it was impossible. And I asked him again, and he said, "Okay, I'll go think of something." And I came up with a solution like 5 days later. Testament to engineers always thinking things are impossible first. And that we went from sort of a nothing solution to a integration, and then looking at one of Jordan's questions of how do you drive convergence, right? It would have been really bad for us to sort of come up with that technology and then sort of give it out to the wild and then say best of luck, right? So one of the tenets that we formed in Developer Platform is trying to do as much as we can centrally. So we actually went to all the services that we had and implemented it as much as we could. And if we needed to get their help, we sort of involved them and did it. And that happened for our OTel integration for context propagation. We set up a Tiger team and we literally implemented context prop on every one of our services that we have here. And that forms a good relationship with the central team and the stakeholders, because the last thing a product team wants to do is sort of be thrashed and they can't launch a feature because they have to integrate a brand new piece of technology, right? And you get this weird sort of animosity forming between platform and product. And meanwhile, if you form a central team who become experts and do it, it's very rewarding for the central team to kind of see their technology get out there, to see the KPIs change, and then the product team saying, thank you for this. So that was one of the wins that we had early on was building that canary as well as forming that process. We have a blog post about that on our engineering blog, DoorDash.engineering, for folks to take a look. The second one was one of the things when I first got here, I kind of noticed the testing was not really unlocked to its full potential that we had here. And when you have a marketplace like DoorDash, it's really hard to test your code because you have to, fake being a dasher, fake being a consumer, fake being a merchant, sort of orchestrate the fake deliveries and et cetera that's going around. And really you need a test tendency, and you need a test platform that can work there. And that's been one of the longest projects that we've been working on. And at the end of Q4, we launched. It took us a year to build, but we have a test tendency now. We have the ability to have a test universe that we can orchestrate all these things in, and that has been one of the most harrowing experiences that we've had, but also one of the most rewarding for our engineers, and such a buildup of the foundation that we've had so far.
Going back to the whole syncing up with executive folks, right? How often do you sync up with your VP on productivity engineering, and what kind of things do you discuss there? What do they care about?
Yeah. So one thing I love is that there's no king's court here. There's no formal sessions. There's no presentations to the board. It's very it feels very natural. So we have monthly check-ins where we take a look at the KPIs. We have our next one coming up in about a week. So we're forming the slide deck we have right now. And oftentimes the slide deck is not for presentation sake, but for documentation sake of here's how we're doing in January, February. And it's really meant to hold accountability as well as tell a story. And that one that we have coming up right now is supposed to look back on January. But it's also supposed to tell the sort of the future progress, right? So you have your PPP, your plans, progress, and problems. And one thing I love about those sessions is that it's not a matter of coming to our head of engineering as well as the other directors and then having your tail between your leg and getting shouted at. It's a lot of times it's how can we help you, right? We really want our platform to succeed here. We know it's really going to help. What can my org do to adopt this new technology? What can and also giving great feedback on where we might be missing the mark, saying it's really good that you're working on this, but I'm just hearing from my engineers that they want to test this thing. Have you thought about prioritizing that? And almost every one of those sessions, I come out, feeling both that we sort of reaffirm to the choices that we've made, as well as changes that we might want to pivot slightly and include in our process. But yeah, once a month we do those sort of roundtable sessions, and I talk with the other directors and our head of engineering on a daily basis. We have Slack makes it really easy just to sort of keep these channels open and share and relay information quickly, which I really love here.
That's awesome. And one thing that came to mind, right? A while back, I read this a blog on your engineering blog. Love that blog, by the way. Justin actually posted a link in the chat about it, where your backend team migrated from Python to Kotlin. And I'm very curious, like what happened? Well, whatever you could share behind the scenes. Like we were talking about the whole getting approval from executives. Did that come from the engineers themselves? Did that come from leadership? And how was productivity involved with that engineering, or was it your guys' idea in the first place? How did all that kind of?
This predates me by a little bit. It also predates many of the other decisions that we've made. Pretty sure it was our head of engineering that made the final call of we're using Kotlin on the back end. Yeah. The way that we have a group of engineers that we call the tech steering group, and while that didn't exist at that time of deciding this, it was sort of the primordial ooze of that. And it's a number of engineers who have been around the block, both at the company and other places, and and sort of can weigh the pros and cons of some of these decisions. And what I've loved is the developer platform not being the judge, jury, and executioner of all the decisions here. We have the ballast point of a different group that we have very few members on, right? And it allows you to sort of have that discussion, that dialogue, rather than just sort of prescripting technologies. I think the reason that we went with Kotlin, if I remember correctly, was that one, we wanted something that was syntactically easy to work with. So Kotlin is a little bit easier to work with than Java. We also wanted something that we would allow allowing for that well-rounded engineer. We would love to have every engineer who's Android engineer work on backend and backend work on Android. I myself am full stack. Maybe I can convince an iOS engineer to take a look at Kotlin one day, though that's much harder to do. And it just sort of Kotlin allowed us to sort of have that permeability a little bit more between the teams, especially when we were young and starting out. We had Android engineers work on backend and vice versa. One of the things, just kind of looking back, I kind of wish I was here for that moment, that big bang, because then I could have set some of the standards on what we wanted to do for our microservices. And, I think that's sort of an example of you can't time it just right of forming one of these orgs, and you're always going to kind of miss some of the decisions. But that doesn't mean you can't come back and sort of improve things, right? So now we're sort of taking a look at the multitude of these. We don't have a mono repo just yet, but we have lots of repositories everywhere and kind of saying, okay, this service does it this way, this service does it this way, and now we're standardizing our services. If someone decided to do Spring Boot, we have a Spring Boot standard. If they do Juice, we have a Juice standard. And then that's all based on Armeria, by the way, which we love. Now we have to migrate folks. And guess how we're migrating? We're doing the central team, and we're going in and saying, taking your service, and we're going to take all the logic and put it in here. And if you can get to that point where you can have a central team migrate someone's service, that means all they're working on is business logic, which is what you want your product engineers to do. You don't want your product engineers to have to think about how to connect to a database or Kafka or Redis. It's, they should be almost like Lambda, right? It should almost be just like functional components. So it's sort of a testament to kind of proving out the future and kind of doing as much as we can to make that a reality versus just kind of hoping.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And sorry if I put you on the spot there a bit. I just read that. Remember, so we're talking about productivity, and you got this massive migration, and how does that happen behind the scenes?
We still have that Python service around. It's slowly being taken out of commission, one API endpoint at a time. Kudos to the teams here that's working on that. I see emails constantly from folks who have engineering wins of killing endpoints there, and it's important to clean up your old code base and take these things out, because a lot of our outages and reliability has happened because of that monolith. Once it's gone, that's it, the sky's the limit on scalability.
And has that worked? Has the result been? Was it worth it? Right. Well, of course, it takes a while for some of that to kick in.
You mean should we have stayed with a Python monolith? No, that's. I don't think that's.
Well, you lose productivity when these migrations happen, right? It's just
you do.
That's the whole. Been involved in so many migrations from Maven to Gradle, for example, right? And sometimes migration would get blocked, right? Because I'm going to lose productivity of all these developers while this thing is migrated.
Migration, for some reason, became a 4-letter word. You say migration and everyone freaks out all the time. And some of the biggest fights I had, in previous jobs have been over migration, right? And I really want to change that to adoption, right? And sort of helping adoption along and making adoption happen. You have your carrots, but you don't really bring out the stick and start whacking people, right? And whatever you can do in terms of automation, central contribution, making it an attractive platform that just sort of makes sense to go to, I think is going to help your overall mission versus sort of the tried and true process that I've seen at other companies where you perform a gigantic spreadsheet, you rank the list of things that need to be done decentrally, the other teams look at that and say, no, we can't do any of these, and send it back. And then you kind of never really, get to where you want. So yeah, it's, I see this on the chat here. Yes, evolution, exactly. You sort of evolve together on the platform choices, right? Your stakeholders are the ones using it. You're not building it for yourself. You're not building for the sake of yourself. You got, they have to want it, right? And you have to help them. You can't just dump it on their laps. And I think that goes back to my early days of developer relations. When you don't have the ability to work with inside of a company, and you have to get your engineers who are just handles on Twitter, complaining about stuff to use things. You can't force them. They'll go to a different alternative, right? So it's really about forming that community and really evangelizing in it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing, Justin. We have a couple of more topics we wanted to get to, but we're running short on time.
I like the questions, honestly.
Yeah, I think we should stick with the questions. That was my feeling as well.
Really relevant stuff coming through.
And Adam, you have a hard stop at 5 till, I'm assuming.
I can go all the way to 11.
Okay.
Yeah, I can. I have a meeting with our head of engineering. It's fine. So it doesn't. But yeah, just 11 o'clock would be good.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think I'm going to try to consolidate a few of these, and it actually comes into some of our wrap up questions anyway, which is pretty good. There are a number of these questions that are kind of like, what's your approach for onboarding new team members? And I would say in some ways too, I would take one step behind that though and say, what are your pointers for even putting together a team like this in the first place? If you want to start this team, and then how do you onboard those folks? And then what should some of their first tasks be in terms of low hanging fruit?
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about this so far as I've built these teams. This dates myself a little bit, but the movie Bad News Bears, right? Sort of. I love forming teams that way, the motley crew of teams. I love having folks that maybe aren't traditionally from a platform background, but sort of understand what it's like to be, in a platform role because they've gravitated towards. They just didn't know this role existed, and then bringing them into the platform fold because it's just sort of a hack. It's you already bring in that empathy from the start, right? They've been in those shoes. They know exactly how the tools are supposed to be used versus when you just sort of strictly have platform engineers who've only ever done platform. They never actually use the tools that they've built with. They lack the context on what they're building. You can fix that also by doing an embed program. And we do that here right now. So we have platform engineers work on feature teams to get some insight, either through the central evolution, as we've now decided to call it, or in cases just saying, hey, go learn how to be a feature engineer. And we've done that as part of the onboarding process. So we had a engineer join our web team and say, hey, go try out being a feature engineer for just a little bit to use the tools and understand, how they work. And I love that process. I think the more you can get your hands on things and get your hands dirty, the better. Me personally, taking on this role, I had to get my hands dirty on every piece of code here. So I made contributions to our Android app within the first couple of weeks here. Ran through all of our code labs. I need to understand what tools we have, and I want everyone that's joining our org to do the same. And it goes a step further. You can't even just think about onboarding into your org. You have to think about onboarding engineers as a whole, right? Because that's the macrocosm of just within the platform. So we've been investing a lot in our new engineering bootcamp, where it's all brand new technology, all different code labs and steps that we're going about that, all built on the code lab system that we built here. So one of the first things we built was a code lab site, right? And based on Google Docs, so it's really easy to kind of make a new code lab and get it published for your fellow engineers to use. And we don't have it fully staffed by developer platform. We have people from the community who care a lot about Kotlin, for example, building out the Kotlin modules and the iOS modules. And that's what I love is sort of that shared ownership. It really helps bring people onboard them and help them grow quickly.
That's, I love that you take that approach, because this is about experience, right? I mean, we can look at numbers and we can go, well, what are we measuring really? At the end of the day, we're measuring the experience of the developer, which has a direct relationship with the happiness of the developer. And so being able to tell that story and paint that picture from multiple diverse backgrounds as opposed to just one place, I think, we think that's really super important too. Speaking though of that, dealing with different personalities and stuff, we had one request to kind of double down on or sort of follow up on this idea of asking for feedback from developers. How do you encourage, I really like actually the direction of this question. How do you encourage developers who may have become sort of inured or numb to some of the pains or occupational hazards of being a software developer? How do you get them to state sort of obvious things sometimes, like, hey, our build times take too long. I don't like waiting 20 minutes. Could I wait 10 instead? How do you get developers to really be forthcoming about that kind of feedback?
I personally have never met a developer that isn't forthcoming about complaints. I think that's I think you can get way more complaints than praise a lot of times from your stakeholders. I think it kind of goes down to the point of listening again. And there's two ways of doing listening. You can send out a survey and maybe get responses from it, right? But if you haven't formed that connection, then you're not going to really get it. My former mobile platform teams at Uber did case studies, literally sat down with engineers from one-on-one and just asked them questions and walked through the answers there. And then we collected all that together and said, oh, okay, here's some common themes that we've seen. And you can do that, you can go out and do that research. You can do listening sessions. We call them office hours. We have them once a week. So not only do we get help, but we just sort of hear them, but you got to read between the lines, right? Because sometimes they don't have the solution, right? They just have the problem. So you said something, hey, I'd like to wait, 10 minutes rather than instead of 12 minutes. And that in your mind might be like, okay, I need to increase the build time, right? And shorten it. But you kind of have to think one step further and say, is there something fundamentally wrong with our build process, or are they building too often? Or, is it something, having to do with the IDE of choice? And you sort of have to go a step beyond. And that's where, if you investigate personally and actually put yourself in their shoes and try things out and understand what they're talking about, you'll get a better insight. So you have to open the dialogue, but then you have to do the work to research. It's exactly what you do with UX, right? It's developer experience and user experience. You have to go and talk to your users, and you have to do case studies and sit down and sometimes sit on your hands and not say anything and just watch, even as painful as it is. Sort of them clicking the wrong button and doing the wrong commands, but you have to sort of see what they're seeing and design for them. So it's about building empathy and putting yourself out there to collect that. You can't do it from an ivory tower or just an email address.
Do you find that having those discussions, kind of helps with that concept before of these pains kind of being normalized, I guess, in the industry, that actually talking through this, we're able to.
It makes me sad when you say normalize pain, right? Because I really wish that we didn't normalize pain of software engineering, right? There's sort of the, you forget, right? Sometimes it's, how difficult it is to just sort of get started for the day, right? Sort of set up your working environment that you have to do, or start a new, things that you only have to do rarely, but you forget how painful they are. Onboarding a new laptop for engineers, for example. And the thing that I kind of get sort of taken aback by is like if when I find out that an engineer has been suffering for this one thing for years and just thought that there was nobody that could actually fix this thing, I personally take that really bad. It's like, I could have helped you. We could have worked with you. We could have fixed this, right? And that's the part where maybe they're just sort of jaded. Maybe they don't trust the people listening to them. Maybe they just don't want to complain because they don't want to get in trouble. So it's about forming that open line of communication, and you have to act on the feedback, right? So that's the other part, is if you just collect feedback and then you say, hey, these are your top problems, but we're going to go work on this other thing instead. It's almost an insult, right? Because they put their self out there. They took their time to tell you. My boss says feedback is a gift, and he always relays that to me, especially when he's giving me strong, constructive feedback. But I think that it's always important to take that to heart, and to really treasure that and to use that. And if you squander it, no one's going to talk to you anymore. No one's going to want to give you the time of day.
And that's so they will pay the cost then of giving you this feedback, knowing that you're going to act on it to make the experience better for them.
Yeah. Sometimes you only have one shot. Sometimes it's just, every interaction with an engineer and a stakeholder has to be a good one, right? Because, that not to say like, hey, Disneyland, smile all the time, or else it's more just, if an engineer comes to you with a problem and then you shoot them down right away, you might have lost that engineer forever now. And they could have been your biggest ally or your biggest, your biggest canary in the coal mine on things that you need to fix, right? So you have to do your part if you're in a platform role, to listen and to be empathetic. Otherwise, don't be in a platform role. It's not for you. You have to have that key personality and that key want to do that.
So then this I have a set of questions here that I'm combining that may actually be sort of antithetical to what you just said, and that you really do need, I think, a certain amount of personal empathy. But given that, what are some of the KPIs that you look at that tend to get the best engagement from developers? And then follow-on question, if somebody were looking for a good, let's say, just starting point, where we could copy paste some of these survey questions that we would be putting in front of developers, do you have some pointers for where somebody might get started with that?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned this before, but the SPACE framework, they have there's a couple articles out there about the SPACE framework. Take a look, because I think that answers exactly what you're looking for. It says, what you can do, to sort of start out in this area, and what you can do with it. Great examples about some of the KPIs that exist. They give a good example about one of the KPIs, sort of a cheat sheet of like, hey, get started with this. For us, one of the biggest things that engineers complained about, gave us the gift of feedback about, was how long it took for pull requests to be reviewed. And so that's one of the KPIs that we're tracking now, is not punishing folks for doing pull request reviews, but looking at the time to first review, right? And then looking at the time between when the review was ready again to when it was responded again, but not looking at the overall time for a review, because we want thorough reviews. We don't want to punish that, right? But we want to make sure that, there's that cycle going quickly between looking at things and responding to things. So we've built that out, and then we built out tools to make that better. So we just started creating a PR reminder bot that says, hey, so-and-so, by the way, you might have forgotten about this PR. It's sitting here. Take a look. And now we have a dashboard. We have a central developer console that we built on top of Backstage from Spotify. And one of the things there, we have developer velocity, we have track, but then we also have a table below that shows all the pull requests that are out of SLA. And it's not only seeing the dashboard in one place, but then how you can affect it and how you can make, what can you do right now to make the KPI better? So it's not only presenting the data, but then the action on the data you can take right in the moment for the engineer or the team.
That's super succinct and good. Thanks, Ruz. I know we're at the top of the hour. Yeah. What are we doing?
I just want to share a slide with a QR code with a link to DoorDash blog, and I know you got to go. So thanks a lot, Adam, for joining. Great one, great conversations, many follow-up questions. I think I was hoping we would take this onto Slack, and yeah,
I'm happy to join. I'm happy to join Slack later on in the Gradle Enterprise Slack that y'all have. If you'd like, I can, if there's want to book an hour for sort of just a Slack.
Yeah, Justin, maybe if you can grab some of the questions and maybe post the link in the chat for anybody who wants to join the Gradle Slack.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sort of like a Reddit AMA style type thing. Yeah. And a quick plug, DoorDash.engineering. Check it out. It has all of our blog posts, job openings, etc. Great stories from our engineering team about what we've worked on, and gives you a little bit better idea for folks. Again, that's just DoorDash.engineering for those who have never used the QR code before in your life. Which is many. Well, I guess that's changed since the pandemic, right? Because of the menus, et cetera. But yeah, love that site. A lot of great stuff that we've seen from folks.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you all on the next one.